On the morning of December 31, 2000, a quiet neighborhood in Setagaya, Tokyo, was about to become the site of one of Japan's most disturbing unsolved crimes. It was supposed to be a day of rest. New Year's preparations were underway across Japan. But for Mikio Miyazawa's extended family, the day would begin with silence, unnerving, unnatural silence. Mikio's mother, Haruko, lived in the adjoining unit of their two-family home. The walls were thin. She had heard nothing strange the night before, no screams, no gunshots. Just the familiar buzz of Tokyo's sleepy suburban air. But when she knocked on her son's door shortly after 10 a.m. and got no response, she sensed something was wrong. The front door was unlocked. She stepped inside. What she saw would scar her forever. Mikio Miyazawa, 44, lay dead at the base of the staircase. Blood pooled around him. His body showed signs of a struggle, bruises, lacerations, and multiple stab wounds. Upstairs, his wife, Yasuko, 41, and their two children, Nina, 8, and Rei, 6, were also dead. All brutally stabbed. Nina's small body was on the same bed as her mother, showing signs of defensive wounds. She had tried to fight back. Rei had likely been the first to die, strangled in his bedroom, possibly while he slept. Police arrived minutes later. What they found next would shake the confidence of an entire nation. There was no forced entry. Nothing was stolen. And yet the killer hadn't fled immediately after the murders. He had stayed up to 6 hours. The evidence was bizarre. The intruder had rummaged through drawers, used the family's computer, and even helped himself to food from the refrigerator. He had eaten ice cream, left dirty dishes in the sink, used their toilet without flushing, and slept on their sofa. Bloodstains on clothing and towels suggested he had tried to clean up but gave up halfway. A surgical mask and jacket found at the scene weren't the family's. Even stranger. When the killer left sometime the next morning, he took almost nothing. But he left behind a trail of clues that baffled investigators. Japanese police immediately launched one of the largest manhunts in their history. Over 246,000 investigators would eventually work the case. They collected DNA evidence, fingerprints, sweat, and clothing. They examined over 12,500 pieces of evidence and interviewed more than 35,000 people. And yet, more than 2 decades later, no arrest has ever been made. At the time, Japan was one of the safest countries in the world. A crime this violent and brazen was unthinkable. A family wiped out in their own home, and the killer stayed for a midnight snack. This was just the beginning.
The Setagaya crime scene wasn't just a house, it was a forensic goldmine. Yet 2 decades on, the killer has still not been identified because the clues, while abundant, only deepened the mystery. Not once did he attempt to cover his tracks. But the tracks were everywhere. Forensic teams recovered over 130 partial fingerprints and palm prints, many smudged but some clear enough to analyze. None matched anyone in the national database. DNA was extracted from blood, sweat, and even feces found in the toilet. The DNA belonged to a male of mixed heritage, East Asian with possible Southern European ancestry, perhaps from the Mediterranean region. Next, there was the clothing. The killer had discarded a grey Uniqlo fleece, a black Airwalk jacket, a handkerchief, and a hip bag, all stained with blood. Each item was traced back to specific store batches. The fleece, for example, had been part of a limited production run. Only 130 units were sold in Japan. Police tracked down nearly every buyer. None were suspects. The Airwalk shoes the killer wore were rare in Japan, but common in South Korea. They were size 27 centimeters, about a US men's 9, and were manufactured in South Korea, where over 80% of the sold pairs had ended up. There were also traces of sand found in the hip bag. Lab analysis showed the sand matched a skate park in Santa Barbara, California. How it got there, no one knows. Was the killer an international traveler? A military man? A tourist? And then came the weapon. Or rather, the lack of one. The murder weapon was never found. Based on wounds, it was likely a Yanagibe knife, a traditional Japanese sashimi blade, long and narrow, often used by chefs. The killer brought it with him and left with it. Some believe he may have injured himself during the attack, which would explain the blood not matching any family member found smeared across the house. The killer also accessed the second floor via a narrow bathroom window, despite it being just 20 inches wide. There were fibers and shoe prints on the toilet below, suggesting he climbed in carefully. This method, police concluded, showed deliberate planning, not a spontaneous act of rage. What also stunned investigators, nothing of value was taken. Expensive electronics, cash, jewelry, all left untouched. Even the money in Yasuko's wallet remained. This wasn't a robbery, it was calculated killings, and the killer acted like he owned the place afterwards. Forensic experts, criminal profilers, and international agencies weighed in over the years. Yet none could crack the case. The clues told a story, but it didn't make sense. The question wasn't just who did this. It was, why would a killer leave so many clues and still disappear without a trace? Before the horror, there was a family, quiet, hardworking, and loving. The Miyazawas were ordinary in every way, until their name became infamous. Mikio Miyazawa, 44, was the father. A mild-mannered man working for Interbrand, a marketing firm. Intelligent but introverted, Mikio had once worked abroad in London. He loved jazz music and was often described as a model salary man. He was home early most nights and rarely socialized. Friends say he kept to himself but doted on his children. Yasuko Miyazawa, 41, was the heart of the home. A former teacher at a nearby school for the disabled, she had left full-time work to raise the kids. Known for her warmth and kindness, Yasuko still volunteered at the school on occasion. She came from a close-knit family. Her mother, Haruko, 71, lived with them and helped with the children. Their daughter, Nina, was only 8 years old. Bright, bubbly, and full of life, she was the type of child who drew people in. Friends from school later remembered her for her big smile and energy. She loved drawing, stuffed animals, and playing the piano. The youngest, Ray, was just 6 years old. He had a developmental disability, possibly autism, and rarely spoke. Mikio and Yasuko had been deeply involved in his care, adjusting their lives to ensure he had a safe, quiet environment. He attended a local special needs program. The family lived in Setagaya Ward, an upscale suburb of Tokyo, but their neighborhood was unusual. Their home was one of just a few left standing beside Setagaya Park, a once bustling neighborhood undergoing redevelopment. Almost every other house on the block had been vacated and demolished. Only 4 homes remained on the cul-de-sac, including the Miyazawas. It was quiet, isolated, nearly deserted at night. To some, this made them more vulnerable. To others, it meant a killer chose them deliberately. What's more, the Miyazawas had been experiencing disturbing incidents in the weeks before the murders. Mikio had complained to neighbors about teenagers climbing over their backyard fence. On one occasion, he had an altercation with a group of loud parkgoers. Some have speculated that this confrontation may have marked the family as a target, possibly an act of revenge. But there were other signs, too. Yasuko had mentioned to her sister that she felt uneasy, like they were being watched. A strange car was seen parked near the house weeks before the murders, and an unknown man was reportedly spotted near the property multiple times. Police later received over 16,000 tips about suspicious persons in the area, but nothing concrete ever emerged. Even the design of the house raised questions. The family lived in a 2-story split unit. The upstairs was theirs, while the downstairs belonged to Haruko, Yasuko's mother. Although technically one house, there were 2 entrances and separate internal spaces. Haruko's area was untouched in the attack. She heard nothing that night. Nothing at all. Why would a killer pass her by? Why kill the young children but not the elderly woman asleep in the same house? The more investigators learned, the less things made sense. The Miyazawas had no enemies. No debts. No secrets. They were a family like any other. Until one night, someone entered their quiet home and slaughtered them with chilling precision. Tokyo police faced their most confounding case in decades, a murder so carefully executed that it shocked the nation. Police established no public sounds were captured, no alarms triggered, no neighbors reported screams. The electricity was left on. Portable lights were left inside. The thread between entry and exit remains foggy. Video surveillance from the neighborhood was minimal. Nearby traffic cameras registered only a small car entering and leaving the street around midnight, nothing else. Witness accounts described a quiet foreign-looking man seen near Setagaya Park in late summer 2000, once at dusk, another time with a skateboard and sandals. Grainy grain-cam footage from local parking garages captured a back-facing silhouette at 11 p.m. on December 30th, mid-height, mid-age, unremarkable. No mugshots matched. Psychological profiles labeled the killer methodical and composed. He'd surveilled the home, picked a time when the children and parents were asleep, stayed to eat and rest. This was cold, clinical behavior, not a crime of passion. Then he exited through the same silent route. The forensic and behavioral mismatches made few suspects viable. Over the years, others confessed, 7 total. None held up. A man in 2004 claimed, "I was in Tokyo that night, but his DNA didn't match." Another, in 2013, admitted himself after watching a TV documentary. He sent a handwritten confession but failed a polygraph. DNA didn't match. Police repeatedly followed up on tips, especially after mass media campaigns like Setagaya 30-year label and the 2016 Netflix documentary. Prominent bloggers dedicated themselves to the case. Yet nothing led to a break. The suspect's identity remained sealed behind a carefully executed puzzle. In 2009, lawmakers abolished Japan's 15-year statute of limitations for murder, prompted in part by this case. DNA legislation was overhauled in 2012, enabling cold case re-entry and broader database cross-referencing. In 2024, the Setagaya Ward Assembly petitioned to expand DNA fingerprinting, mirroring international cold case strategies. Annual memorial services continue today. Some call the evolving inquiries Tokyo's ghost investigation, while others fear it has taken on mythic status, a crime too perfectly scripted to solve. With each new forensic method, from next-gen sequencing to AI voice analysis of surveillance audio, investigators revisit the case, but there remains one stark truth. The DNA, the fibers, the timing, the footprints, they all point to someone, but none point to a name. And so the manhunt rolls on, in silence, beneath the buzzing neon lights of Tokyo. The story of the Setagaya family is not just a tragedy, it's a heartbreak etched into the conscience of an entire nation. Mikio, Yasuko, Nina, and Rei were a family like any other, full of dreams, love, and routine. Mikio worked hard to provide, Yasuko nurtured her children with love and care, and their kids were just beginning to discover the world. For more haunting cases, real investigations, and the truths the world tried to forget, like and subscribe to Worldwide Crime Time.